Hi everyone and welcome to Fan Commentary. Now, one of the main complaints to Power Rangers RPM is being very different to past Power Rangers seasons. And, in a lot of ways, you're right, it has a very different take on what the series does and did from this point, but it also still has all the things that I enjoyed from Power Rangers past. And whenever someone says, oh, I don't like RPM for X reason, it's just like, fine, you don't like it. I don't like Samurai and Wild Force as example, but I will defend RPM with this episode because this sums up what Power Rangers is. Jackie Marchand came up with a really excellent episode, and she understood that, Power Rangers can be action adventure dramatic, but also be corny, stupid, and funny. While we have all these characters in the PR universe, with RPM being serious, we have Ziggy, who embodies a lot of what classic PR is. Obviously, here they're trying to, figure out like who do we have to get for the Green Ranger, and I don't know what Ziggy did. He must have simply lied to bring a lot of people here because if you think about it, who would really want to become a Power Ranger, especially in the RPM universe, when it's in this dire situation? The entire planet's basically wiped out. You have to defend the city at all costs. And, like, who would really want to do this? So it makes sense that Ziggy would pretty much lie and say it's a costume party show thing. I also love this bit because a lot of PR seasons, they don't explain their tech in a really practical way. Yes, we have Billy who says things in big words, and even here, Dr. K says in big words, but she explains what the Ranger powers actually do, which I love. And I also love that RPM had the Ranger suits have their abilities. The one thing I really hate was that in Ninja Storm, Dino Thunder SPD, they introduced the Rangers having civilian powers, which is cool, but it kind of supersedes the Ranger-esque superpowers of them. So it felt like power on top of power, and on top of it, we didn't get to see them all that much because, again, when they're not civilian all that often and the Rangers are the main focus, so you wouldn't do these abilities. So I'm great that RPM gave them all these different abilities and explained their limitations because, like, for example, Dylan has a shield that's virtually invincible, which could be a plot hole, but they explain so much into it where it's like, you only have 5 seconds, you can do this, you can do that. And it also shows them training because, again, you're not perfect at being a ranger on the first go. And it all factors into a contrast to like when Ziggy becomes the Green Ranger later because he, above all people, is not trained and a complete idiot. I like how they react to this because you're like, okay, this is funny, but this is not what I want. It just shows how disconnected Ziggy is and all these people are to what the situation is. It's like, you're going to fight, you're going to do this, and then why do they even come with superhero costumes? I think this scene also shows how much like character of Ziggy is. Are you like paying attention to anything? It just focuses on him so much, and it's just like this is the reason why the Rangers hate Ziggy. I even like that they actually have a camera behind there filming him, which we don't get to see much of this screen over here. That's what I also like about RPM. The directors and all the people who work on the show, they tried a lot of different things where they're like, let's, try to focus on Ziggy with the giant camera so that he feels more uncomfortable. Or we, have Dylan on that circular table to keep him like, feeling a little odd and different and, make Dr. K even more weirder. I just love all the costumes in here. And here's another great thing. It's just like, okay, we have to have a mob-like character, but we have to put it in the Power Rangers realm of, where it makes sense, and or we can't go too far with it. At the same time, Jackie is also making fun of cliche action movies on top of everything. There's a little bit of something in here that you can appreciate if you loved 70s and 80s action films that did stereotypical cliche type of stories. Which is a good plan, actually. It's one of the main obvious flaws that a dome would have. It's like, can you just simply go underneath it and infiltrate the place? Here we begin with Tanaya's first introduction with her really creepy whistling, which was actually interesting because like that hasn't been done on Power Rangers ever. And this is also a great idea because think about it. Everyone in Vengeance's plan are obviously monitoring the city, and they'll try to use any type of opening they can to infiltrate it or, cause a chaos. And Ziggy saying, we need people for the series operated green ranger suit, Vengeance would be like, that's great. I can send someone in as undercover and steal the tech. It's a perfect logical thing to do. And it just shows how technically dumb everyone was because think about it. Scott and everyone, including Dr. K, didn't think of the obvious. Like, we shouldn't, do this. But then again, they're in this predicament. We need a grain operator. And how are you going to get people without telling them? It's a conundrum. I always found it odd that the Rangers here didn't kind of put two and two together. She's very similar to Dylan. He was off the charts, and they found out he was a cyborg. And it's just like, wouldn't you kind of think of that first? Then again, maybe, they're so desperate, they're just not thinking of it at that moment. This is where teleporting in past seasons would have helped him so much in a lot of cases because Kay could have just transported the series morpher to them, or anyone could have gone there and come back. I always wonder why she teleported to the floor and instead of like his hand. Maybe it was just this is her way of like, I really don't like you. I like Ziggy too because he shows he does have spunk and he can do things, which is how he got out of Fresno Bob's situation in the first place. And I always say this is a perfect example of how to do a reference. If you're familiar with Go-onger, Honto loved to use a similar scooter bike in it and always wore a helmet. This is how you do a reference to Go-onger without being obvious, which is what I hated about in Dino Charge when they named the planets. It was too obvious and on the nose. Here it's very subtle, and if you were a fan, you can get it. If you're not, it won't bother you at all. And I also love how they played fun of people talking so much and spilling the beans of the villain, and so it's like, why don't you just like punch them in the face or do something to interrupt them? And here's another joke, someone running through boxes and other people. It's like every cliche from classic action movies are here. It shows the production team is just having fun. It's just like, yeah, you should have fun while you're filming an episode if you can do it. If you have a character that is comedic and funny, it will work even in a serious show, which is why I love many of the characters in PR. Damon, Joel, they all follow the same, rule set. It's like you can have comedy in Power Rangers with something dramatic. You just have to get that perfect balance, and I believe Ziggy was it. You can count on Ziggy, even though he's goofy and does screw up. He knows what, this is bad. I can't get anyone to touch this morpher. I have to do anything at all costs. And he does take some risks, which, is to his character because, he had to get away from Fresno Bob. He was escaped the city and was going to try to survive out in the desert. He even went, try to scam Dylan into getting his car. So, I mean, he does think on his head. No matter what, it would have happened regardless. It could have happened to you, Scott. And Tanaya was going to go after the morpher no matter what. I always wondered how Ziggy knew where he was going to be. I mean, I guess they come here all the time. I'm assuming they were collecting some money from someone. Maybe there was a race going on with horses or something at this point. I like that. He actually references, yeah, money, like $10 million will not fit in a bag, which happens all the time in movies. I just love the logic. It's just like, okay, Tanaya beat you guys before, and you're going to go at it again. It's just like, what's the point? Ziggy's not stupid. He would not have the morpher in the bag like that during his plan. It would have been so stupid if they did do that. Because, well, what would happen if Fresno took the morpher and used it on one of his goons? That engine there being there was perfect to cover up where the cable is to secure her on the hood. I guess she's programmed to do this because it really doesn't make sense to keep endlessly saying this. I guess Vengeance has a lot of, vanity, and he's like, I have to make them all perfect and spew this nonsense of my domination over the world. Keep on talking. This is the reason why you screwed up. Milo, your accent slipped through there, which is like one of the few times he actually does. He's pretty good at this. Now, this thing, I wish this scene had played out a little bit better because obviously they're fighting over the morpher, but you can clearly see Ziggy activating it on purpose. I wish there was more fighting with the handle where you see her trying to pull it off him and then him trying to not make her hit the lever. I know it's an awkward design morpher, so that's why they had to do it this way, but they could have done it a little bit better because it just feels like, oh, I have it on. I have to turn the switch. And I do like that Ziggy's like, I don't want to be a Power Ranger. I don't want to be a Power Ranger. I'm not qualified. I'm an idiot. I like that. It's like, not everyone has to be like, ooh, I'm a Power Ranger. I'm going to kick butt. I also love Ziggy because he compliments Hanto on go-onger. Hanto has a specific personality, and it's very difficult to blend two different type of characters between Japanese footage and U.S. footage. Ziggy really good because he has his own quirks, but then he can blend in Hanto's quirks. Where, like for example, Jake in Megaforce could not do that between the two characters from Go Sager and Go Kaiger. And this is also a great way to use the Sentai footage. Now, this is the first time Hanto became Go on Green in Go-onger, and it was a very different story, so they couldn't use a lot of the footage, so they worked around it. But in a lot of cases with PR, like in Samurai, they wouldn't try to incorporate the characterizations of what was going on in the episode. They would simply default to the Sentai footage, and it would be like, you lost, like what happened to the US material. It's like, here, Ziggy is scared and runs away, and he doesn't want anyone else to find out he's the Green Ranger. That doesn't happen in Go-onger. They go underground and they infiltrate a base, and then the other team comes in. That's all cut out and changed around to fit our story. And it works really good. It doesn't feel disconnected. That's how you're supposed to use editing tricks and dealing with the Sentai footage, which, MMPR had to do a lot because they had to cut around so many different things. And, it feels lost in recent seasons where they're like, let's just default to Sentai footage and never bother with the US material when it doesn't need it. Because that's why we have weird focus episodes where it's about this character, say, like in Ninja Steel Haley, but then it'll switch over to someone else. And you're like, why did that happen? And then it would go back to Haley. Even if you may not notice it, subconsciously you're like, why did this end up being an episode for one character and then all of a sudden another? I love this because it was what you would do in real life. It's like, oh, I'm really cool in this suit, and you would just completely forget about you're in a fight and get taken advantage of. I never liked it when they would pick and choose, like, to squish Sentai footage or crop it. It's just like, you don't really need to squish it. You just go pan and scan. That's what I never liked when RPM or the other seasons from beginning with Bokenger and Overdrive, where they had to deal with the whole widescreen and full screen issue. It's just like, you could have handled it much better. I like that. He got cut off. He could easily have just been a curse there. I also like how Dylan doesn't tell them anything. He's like, this is not really important right now. We have to deal with a Zord fight. We'll deal with this later. He stays focused, even though how stupid the situation is. I like that they actually had Ziggy say, "When do I get those?" That's a good way to keep it like, oh right, yeah, they're not in the fight at all, and they're just onlooking. Which Ziggy, is inexperienced. He has no idea how to use a Zord right now, so it works. While in the go-onger episode, there is an actual explanation. Even Dylan could be funny. He's doing this on purpose too. He's just like, I just want to wait until to see their face. I like that they, explain everything because, it's permanent. You can't take it out. It's just like how Time Force's morphers work. They're locked once they're picked, which is a good security feature. I mean, it does have some issues because, what if you retire or get killed? How does this affect the team? Oh, Ziggy, you're breaking Zordon's golden rule. I really love Ziggy. He's probably my favorite character out of all the RPM characters because it's also because of how Milo acted him. It's just he has that innocence, that idiocy, but then he pulls through and can do a lot of things, which is why I appreciate him much. I wish he would return.